we've got a fun one today because I'm going to show you 3 of my favorite ways to preserve fresh produce. All right, I'm going to show you how to preserve lemons with nothing but just the lemons and salt. I'm going to show you my favorite way to pickle red onions, and then I'm even going to give you a crash course in fermenting peppers and making it into hot sauce. All you need is a few simple ingredients, some jars, maybe some bags, a good set of knives, and we're on our way. Let's do it. Now, we all know there's a number of different ways to cut the onion, but when I'm doing pickled onions, this is the only way that I do it. We're gonna cut right down the root end of the onion, straight through, just like that. Of course, make sure you take off any of that extra peel that might have stuck around. I'm gonna take off just a little bit of this end of the onion. Now, I've always been one to say, I don't think this side of the onion and slicing this way is the prettiest. So what I do is I also take off the root end now. Now, little pro tip, this might be what makes you cry. When you get rid of the root end of the onion, that starts telling the onion, hey, I've been cut, and it can start producing chemicals that makes you cry. So just beware, this may be a goggle step for you. So again, instead of cutting this way, I like to go this way because I feel like it gives the better look of the onion once it's pickled. It's a little bit smaller. I feel like I can cut it a little bit thinner, and it works really well in a number of different applications. Once we get to this midpoint, always turn it back over and continue chopping just like you were. Just like that, we have some beautiful thinly sliced onions for our pickling. Now, if you're using pickled onions for an application that demands precision, go ahead and peel off one of the layers of the onions. You can lay it a little bit flatter, and then we can slice just like this to make sure you're getting the correct length, the correct width, and it is just one single layer of onion. This is also a really good tip if you're doing a brunoise or you're, again, doing something that really needs more precision and it needs to look absolutely perfect on the plate. Just like that, a bunch of wonderful little matchsticks. Now, to ensure that I have the correct volume for my pickling solution, what I like to do is fill my jar that I'm gonna do my pickling in with my onions all the way up. You might want to leave a little bit of headspace at the top, but you don't need to do that much. You can go ahead and just pack them right on in there. Oh, guy's running away too. That looks pretty good to me. And then I'm gonna take water and just fill it all the way up. We're gonna use the displacement method and we're gonna find out how much liquid can actually be held in here. That looks pretty good to me. I know once we use a heated liquid, these onions will start to wilt a little bit and they will end up all underneath that liquid. So we're gonna bring in another measuring tool here and very gently pour all of our liquid in. I can see I'm sitting right at 300 milliliters. I like to do a 50-50 mix of water and vinegar in my pickling solution. So I know I need 150 milliliters of vinegar and I need 150 milliliters of water. I've got my 150 milliliters of water and I'm just gonna add in some white vinegar to get us up to 300 milliliters. Now, as always with recipes, I invite you to play around with what flavors you like the best. You can try to use red wine vinegar. You can use apple cider vinegar. Those are all going to impart a lot of different flavors. In this case, I'm adding some other aromatics that I really want to come through a little bit better. So I'm just going to have white vinegar. Into our pot here, we are going to add our water and vinegar solution. In addition to that, we are going to add 1 tablespoon of white sugar and another tablespoon equal amounts of kosher salt. This is going to give that sweet and salty profile along with the acidity in the vinegar. It's going to be a great profile. For aromatics, I'm going to add about another tablespoon of fennel seeds. and about a half tablespoon of black peppercorns. This is gonna give a really nice profile to our pickling liquid. It's gonna have a little bit of that peppery bite. It's gonna have that great floralness from the fennel seed. It's gonna be really, really nice. I'm gonna bring this up, not to a boil. We're not making a syrup here, so I'm gonna do medium, high heat just until that sugar and salt has dissolved. As you can see, our salt and sugar has now officially dissolved. We still have our beautiful aromatics in there, and this is ready to pour over our sliced onions. So we've got our onions ready. Next thing I'm gonna do is stuff some fresh thyme right on top. This is gonna give another really great herbaceous bite, and it's gonna infuse all the way into all of our onions here. And then we are gonna pour our vinegar and water solution with those black peppercorns and fennel seeds right over top. It's gonna fill all the way up, just like that. Now I'm going to immediately seal these up. Let them sit at room temperature for about an hour or so to really marry the flavors, let them get to know each other. Then I'm gonna pop them in the fridge, and they are gonna save for a really long time. I don't want to tell you indefinitely, but if you keep these in the fridge, these will be good for months, but I don't think they're gonna last that long. Now, it's always good practice to make sure that you're labeling the food that you put in your refrigerator, but definitely with preserves or ferments to make sure that you know exactly when it was made, what it is, and when it's gonna expire. I'm gonna take that off, plop it right on the front. And now there's no guessing. We know exactly what's in there. We know when we made it, and we have that idea of when it might expire. When cutting your lemons for preserved lemons, the whole idea is to get as much salt to cover as much surface area of the lemon as possible. We want it to be all over the outside peel, but also inside to help release the juices from the flesh of the lemon. So here's how I like to cut my lemons when I'm making preserves. Looking at the lemon, we have a top where the stem is, and then the tail, the little nub at the bottom. I'm gonna very closely shave off both the top and the tail. I don't wanna see any flesh when I do this. I still just wanna see that white pith on both sides. From there, it's pretty easy. The lemon will stand up now because we've cut it, and we're gonna make an X mark almost all the way through the lemon. You can see that I still have a little bit of room underneath the lemon there. So we're gonna go one way like that. Make that same X mark almost all the way down again. And then just like that, that lemon opens up beautifully, and that salt is gonna be able to get all through the lemon. For our preserved lemons, we are just gonna take kosher salt and fill each and every nook and cranny we can of these lemons with salt. My favorite thing about preserved lemons is there's really no measuring. Fill that sucker up, stuff it in the jar. The tighter the fit in your jar, the better. This is gonna marry all those flavors together. Make sure that salt is interacting with each and every part of these lemons. Once you've got them all in there, you can use any sort of masher that you have. Back of a wooden spoon works just fine. I like to crush them up a little bit, expel some of that lemon juice, because that's gonna help, once again, dissolve that salt, get everything working together. It's gonna work for a really awesome preserved lemon. I top it up with just a little bit more salt. Don't worry about it being too salty. Once these come out of the solution here, you're gonna wash them. You're gonna run them under cool water, get all the salt off. And remember, we're only using that outside zest, that yellow part of our lemons to use for these preserves. So that inside flesh is gonna absorb a lot more of that salty flavor. You're gonna have that beautifully flavorful and floral outside part of the lemon. Just like with our onions, I'm gonna go ahead and cap these off and let them sit at room temperature just for about an hour. Again, we want that salt to incorporate, to break down in that lemon juice and get all through each and every part of the lemons. And then, of course, we are once again going to label. So once again, we're gonna label this bad boy up. We have the date that we made it, what it is, and I also like to include the instructions for what I need. I know these are gonna take about 6 weeks in the fridge to really get to where they need to be. And so I'm gonna remind myself right at the bottom saying, this is what it is, this is when I made it, this is how long we need to wait until it's ready to go. Now you can ferment a lot of different peppers and a lot of different vegetables in general. But today I'm gonna go for a green hot sauce that's gonna utilize jalapeno peppers, and for a little extra heat, some serrano peppers. Now, again, you can use whatever peppers you like here. If you like it a little spicier, you can find a habanero or a scotch bonnet. You could even go up to a ghost pepper or a scorpion if you'd like. That's not for me, and so I'm gonna show you a little more mild of a hot sauce today. But please, let your mind run wild with this one. You can use whatever you'd like to make a beautiful hot sauce. I'm gonna start by taking the tops off of all of my peppers. If you'd like at this point, you could take out the inner seeds and the membrane there. That's where a lot of the heat is stored. Now, I told you I don't like a lot of heat, but I do like a little heat. And so with these serranos and jalapenos, I am gonna keep both the rib, the membrane in, and the seeds. Now, there are a lot of different ways to do fermentation, such as the brine method, where you'll take a mason jar and fill it up with a salt and water solution and try to weigh down or keep these peppers underneath that liquid. They have to stay underneath that salt and water solution to stay safe. But by far, my favorite is the mash method. And instead of keeping peppers whole, we're not only gonna cut them in half like this, but we are gonna pulverize them in a food processor. This is gonna give a lot easier ferment, and it's also not gonna require this salt and water solution. We're just gonna use salt. That keeps it a little bit simpler, and in my opinion, a little bit safer as well. We are gonna take our food processor and fill it up with these jalapenos and serranos. Again, I have kept in the ribs and the seeds of these peppers. If you don't like it super hot, definitely go ahead and take out the white parts and those seeds. That's where almost all of the heat in the pepper is gonna be located. As you can see, I have a glove in my right hand as well. Peppers are hot. Seeds and the ribs are hot. And if I'm touching these with my hands and then I go to touch my eyes, it can cause burning sensation. So always be careful when you're handling hot peppers, and glove up. And when you're done, take it off and throw it away. We've got our peppers in there. We are gonna put on the top of our food processor, and we are gonna let it go. And just like that, we have perfectly chopped peppers ready for our mash ferment. Now let me show you how I'm gonna weigh these out, get the correct salt content, and start fermenting. Two things you can't compromise with when you're fermenting are sanitation and measurements. From this point forward, every vessel that I'm using has been sanitized. It's been warmed up to a certain degree. It's been cleaned, soap and water, and a special sanitizing liquid to make sure that no bugs that we don't want getting in here are gonna get in there. Now, fermentation and lacto-fermentation that we're doing today is a certain kind of bacteria that is causing this fermentation. It's an enzyme that is converting the glucose or the sugar in our peppers to yeast and fermenting. There's an enzyme that is converting the glucose in here and allowing it to ferment. And so we need to make sure that we are keeping only those enzymes and only those good bugs in our ferment. I'm also going to be using a kitchen scale to make sure that I have the correct percentage of salt in my ferment to make sure that it ferments, but it also stays at a safe level of pH. Let's check that out. So to start out, in our sanitized container, I am going to pour in all of our peppers, and we're gonna get a base weight. Make sure we get each and every pepper in there. Be awesome if we got a nice round number, but I don't know if we'll be that lucky. All right, so we are at 167 grams of peppers here. Now, there's a lot of different information out there about what percentage is best. Through my trial and error, I have found that 3% salt to the amount of peppers that you have is going to be the perfect solution for this lacto-fermentation. So we have our 167 grams of peppers here. And what we're going to do is divide that by 100 and then multiply by 3. And that is going to give us our 3% salt that we need to help with this fermentation. So if you do all that math, it comes out to about 5 grams. So I'm going to set this again on my kitchen scale. And we are going to weigh out 5 grams of kosher salt. It may not seem like a lot. This is all the salt that you need to start this fermentation and to keep it safe. Oftentimes you will see fermentations done in mason jars or in something with an airlock on it so you can see the bubbling in the fermentation. And that's fantastic. But something that I have really fallen in love with recently is fermenting in vacuum bags. This does a couple things. One, I can keep an eye on it. I know how much air it's producing because this bag will inflate when it is producing gases from fermentation. But also, it makes sure it is airtight. Seals can break on mason jars, or they can be not quite as airtight as you want. But when you're using vacuum seal, you can absolutely know that there is no additional air getting in there. And when it puffs up, it is only because of the gases that it's creating from fermentation. It keeps it sealed, it keeps it safe, and that's why it's my favorite way. Now this bag has also been sanitized and it is ready to go. So we are gonna take our peppers, pour them right into our bag. Make sure to get each and every last bit in there. And I like to get them all the way down to the bottom. And then we're gonna add in our 5 grams of salt. Again, this is 3% of the total weight of our peppers. And this is all we need to ensure that this ferment is gonna be great. Before I seal the bag, I do wanna make sure to massage in the salt, make sure it gets all around these peppers, and we have an equal distribution of the salt throughout our mash. As you can see, these are all beautifully chopped up. We now have that salt distributed throughout, and we're gonna take that air out. Sealing up our bag at the top, making sure it is perfectly airtight. Now you can do this with a larger vacuum sealer. I happen to have these bags that have this specific port. You can use whatever you have available to you. You could use the water displacement method by dunking this into a pot of water to help remove all the air. But I am always going to suggest, if you are using a bag for fermentation, that you use some sort of vacuum sealer. Beautiful. You will see a little bit of liquid rush out of the peppers. We've added salt and there is inherent liquid in the peppers. Depending on your vacuum sealer, it may or may not like water getting up in it. So as soon as that gets to the top, make sure that you stop the process, pull it out. And just like that, we have a beautifully vacuum sealed mash. 3% salt, which is just 5 grams to our 167 grams of peppers that we used. Now, fermentation time on this is going to depend on a lot of different factors. Your ambient room temperature, if it's sitting in the light or not, how much this ferments, how much sugar is in the peppers that you're using. If you add in any garlic or shallot or any other flavorings, which you absolutely can do, that is going to change how quickly or how much gas this produces while it's fermenting. If you add any sort of fruit, I've seen a lot of beautiful blueberry or mango in a hot sauce. Those inherently had a lot more sugar than just our peppers here, and those are going to ferment quickly. So when you're using a bag to ferment, you need to be very, very careful. This will inflate and this will get bigger, so you need to be keeping an eye on it. My rule of thumb is, especially if you're starting with fermenting, just go 1 week. There's a chance that it won't blow up all the way, and that's not necessarily what you're looking for. A full bag does not indicate great fermentation. It just indicates that it is fermenting. So start with a week, see how you like that. Then you can take it out to 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, a month. But you need to make sure it stays airtight. No air is getting into it. and it is producing those gases eventually. When it comes time to make your hot sauce and bottle it and see if, it has fermented, I am going to suggest you invest in some pH papers. This is going to test the pH of your sauce, or the acidity level of your sauce. And a general rule of thumb is that you're looking for a pH level of 3.4 or lower. That's going to be in the safe range for your home hot sauce, all right? A packet like this comes with a ton of test strips. You're just going to dip it into that sauce and then use the color codes here to see where your pH level is. Now, there are other tools that you can invest in. There are instant readouts that look like thermometers that will show you to the 10th of a percent what your pH is, and you can absolutely look into those. These are fantastic, and as long as you're okay with reading colors, these should be perfect and keep you safe. Now, I hope you've learned a lot today on some fun ways to preserve your local and your fresh produce. Now, these red onions, again, these are, you can already tell, are starting to pickle. They're starting to turn the liquid almost a little bit pink or purple already. They're softening up. These should be ready to go, honestly, in just a couple of hours. My favorite uses for these are on top of sandwiches or burgers, specifically steak sandwiches or a really nice thick beef burger. The acidity just cuts through that fat really well, and it's a nice little punch of flavor, different than just your normal raw onion or even your caramelized onions. Preserved lemons, honestly, might be one of my favorite ingredients across the board in cooking. They're so versatile. You can use them in a lot of different ways. I often use them in salads as either a little brunoise, so cut up really, really smallly and used as a garnish on that salad. It adds a nice pop of salinity and acidity at the same time, but I also like to chop them up really fine and put them in a vinaigrette. They really, really flavor that vinaigrette well. It's different than a normal lemon, but it has that beautiful lemon flavor still. I'd also suggest, once you cut them up, you're just taking, like I said earlier, we're just taking that outer zest, so just the yellow part, chopping them up, putting them in baked goods. It just adds a little layer of, what is that? What's different in this to your lemon bread or a lemon curd? It's really, really fun. You can really use this wherever you're using lemon zest, and it's just going to enhance it that much more. Once this hot sauce is done, I'm going to blend it up. You can follow your favorite recipe on the exact way to add in maybe some garlic or some shallots, some different flavors. I like to add anything like that after fermentation because I like to make sure that I can at least somewhat control how this is going to go. When I know it is just peppers in here, I kind of know what the fermentation is going to look like. Afterwards, I'll add in some garlic, I'll add in some shallots, different aromatics. You can add in fruits, you can add in any different flavor that you're looking for. And again, you don't just have to use jalapenos or serranos. Whatever your heat tolerance is, go for it. Use that habanero, use that scotch bonnet, those scorpions, those ghost peppers. Whatever fits your tolerance the best, your flavor profile the best, please use it. Use these as guidelines, not as specific recipes. So again, these are just 3 different ways that you can preserve your fresh produce. Always make sure that you're labeling, always make sure that you're sanitizing, and have some fun out there.